Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this week's Improvement Showcase, which kicks off Series 7 of our weekly showcases, the theme of which is cross-agency collaboration. And we've got the pleasure of having Brett Manuel from the Department of Premier and Cabinet this afternoon. But before we get on and I introduce Brett to run us through his presentation, I'd just like to acknowledge the land certainly that I'm coming to you from today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and we pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge their enduring and ongoing deep connection with their country, and particular respect to any of you that are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander attendees with us today. For those of you that are tuning in for the first time, we are the Commission on Excellence and Innovation in Health, the CEIH. Our vision is together, let's create better healthcare for South Australians. So really this speaks to the heart of what we're about, which is working together. So very much working in partnership across the entire health sector. And our remit is as broad as working collaboratively to make sure that we are providing better experiences and health outcomes for all South Australians. So our remit is both public and private healthcare. That gets us involved with one of our straplines is wherever healthcare happens, we're there to help people think differently, spark new ideas, unblock things that are preventing them from doing continuous improvement and innovation activities, and really supporting this kind of work wherever we can. And one of the really important roles in that is actually connecting people and ideas. So often there's a lot of people throughout the health sector doing amazing work, often in isolation and not really always understanding that other people are tackling the same problems or trying the same things. So that was really the genesis of these improvement showcases, is to bring people together, highlight what's going on already across the state, so that we can share ideas and spur new ones. Just a quick bit of housekeeping in terms of how the sessions run today. So we have a presentation which is being recorded. They usually go for about 20 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity for people to ask questions. The question and answer session is not recorded. So if I could ask everyone that's on the call today just to make sure you've got your microphones and cameras off for the time being. And then certainly when we come into the Q&A, we'd ask you to put your mics on and your cameras on, and also use the chat function to ask any questions that you might have. A quick plug for future improvement showcases. So the showcases take place on a Thursday afternoon at 1 p.m. As I mentioned, it's really about connecting people and ideas so that we're learning from one another and not reinventing the wheel, but also then making sure that people understand they're part of a much wider health sector support network. If you have a story to tell, we would love to hear from you. So it may have been something that you tried that worked fabulously, and we'd really love to learn how that worked and how we can do more of those things. It might have been something that you tried that didn't work so well, and we're equally keen to learn from those stories as well. So wherever you've got opportunities to share the work that you've done and the learnings from it, please let us know. We'd really love to hear from you. You can contact us via email, which is on the slide, ceih@sa.gov.au. So without further ado, as I mentioned, the theme for Series 7 is cross-agency collaboration. We've got two presentations happening this week and next. You'll see on the screen next week, we're hearing from Damon Finich about integrated youth mental health care. And today we're hearing from Brett Manuel, who is the Strategic Engagement Lead for the Department of Premier and Cabinet. And Brett is talking to us today about Better Together, which is the government's engagement framework. So I will hand over to Brett to talk us through the strategy and its development.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you're well today. And look, it's a real pleasure to be with you today. Typical IT issues, I'm not able to control my slides, so Jay's going to be the man driving as we go through, and I've just got a few slides just to keep me in mind and give you some visual prompts as we go through. So the Strategic Engagement Unit of the Department of the Premier and Cabinet is an advice, consultancy, training facilitation arm of government to really help you in agencies and departments to do more effective collaboration, to make sure you're connected with other people that can bring a richness and a depth to your engagements. So as we go through, one of the underpinning documents that we have as people that are out engaging, whether it's across government or out in the community, is the Premier and Cabinet Circular number 36 around best practice stakeholder engagement. And just a couple of quick points that I'll pull out from that, Jay, the next slide, is that engagement is fundamental to efficient, open and collaborative government. It's best practice to be out there doing it. And South Australia has led the way across the nation in some areas in deliberative democracy. And our programs are viewed by the rest of the world. Actually, we constantly get reminders and prompts and questions from people elsewhere, including study tours from Ireland, that Israel, that resulted in a trip back to there with us doing some sharing and training as well. So they're brilliant opportunities, and people are looking to South Australia because of our reputation. Thanks, Jay. We, of course, are very closely aligned with the South Australian Government's Public Sector Code of Ethics and the values, so they are underpinning everything that we do and fundamental to everything that we do. And of course, what we're talking today, cross collaboration, is definitely a key part of that. Thanks, Jay. We use the IAP2 framework as a foundational piece for that. And Jay's highlighted that you guys in health are well and truly aware of that. So the Code of Ethics and core values are really important to the work that we do internally and externally. Next slide. And that particular public participation spectrum is just absolutely critical for us when we are working with partners across government to actually take some time to make sure that we are using the same language, we are setting the same expectations, and we're making sure that we're having conversations early if consultation means a different thing to the other group to what we do, if co-design means one thing to one group and what it means for another group. So this is just a little reminder how important this is as an internal tool, but also helping to set your expectations when you're coming together. And what I really want to do today in the short time we've got is just to give you a South Australian context of what's going and what resources are available to you, but also talk about 3 case studies that demonstrate cross-sector and cross-government collaboration at the moment. So we'll get into those. Thanks, Jay. The Better Together program is the foundation of what we're looking at. The principles of engagement I'll go through in a second, but just to let you know that bettertogether.sa.gov.au has various resources on it, and the ones that I will talk about today are on there as well. Thanks, Jay. Why are we engaging? Obviously, we want to build a rich, a deep, a strong engagement that brings the right people together so that the right people are informed of decision-making processes, are involved when they need to. And we know that sometimes working across sector can be one of the most challenging areas to engage. We're all focused on what we do. We assume that other people are doing the same sort of thing, and that's where it can trip it up. So when I'm talking about the case studies today, that's where I hope that the strengths of their engagements will bring forward some rich things for you. Thank you. The principles of engagement are really quite simple, and they are principles. When the team set out to develop the Better Together program some 10 years ago now, they looked at, do we do a whole lot of framework, strategies and other documentation, and they realised that across government, there was just too much variety in the size and the depth of engagement, and so principles were really important to them, and so that's what we've based the work around. So knowing who we are talking to, knowing the history, knowing why we are engaging, starting and working together with people as early as possible so that they come on the journey and they have ownership, being genuine and using relevant tools and mechanisms are absolutely fundamental to the engagement we do. And that includes our cross-government collaboration as well. Thanks, Jay. One of the key areas that you guys in CEIH and your partnerships do quite well, and I've really been heartened and impressed by what I see, is understanding the people that you work with, whether it's the community or across government. But when we do training with our other state government colleagues and also out into the sector, one of the key aha moments in training is often that a stakeholder analysis or a stakeholder identification piece can be deeper and more informative than just a list of who are the other organisations, or who are the other protagonists, or who are the people that are likely to complain to the minister, or who are the people in our decision-making tree. So on the Better Together site is this template and this matrix that is really a helpful tool in understanding current state and future state and some of the nuance around our relationships. This is so important as a project team when you're coming together, but also sitting down where you can and doing that as an early piece when you're coming together with your counterparts in other departments and agencies, helping them understand who the players are and talking through with them about what level of influence or involvement they can or need to have. For the comms people in the room, it's a really rich point where none of us have the budgets that we want to do the amount of engagement or communications and marketing that we might want to. So understanding other people's relationships, credibility, communications channels are absolutely critical for us to get the word out to consumers and clients and end users of our systems, but also internal people. Who else needs to be involved in this that might not be actually in the room, but we need to take on this journey as well. So this tool or something similar, if you don't have something, feel free to use this one. But CEIH, I'm sure, have a piece that really helps you understand your stakeholders right from the start. Thanks, Jane. You know, the main thing I'm going to say about those 6 principles and the really key things about this is that to build your credibility with your group, to build your trust, to build systemic change in a healthy way, it really comes back to not just doing things to people, but looping back time and time again as appropriate, reinforcing what they've told you, what you've heard, and what influence that had. And the important bit here is at the start, being really clear with people at what point they can influence something. And telling somebody, whilst it might be hard if they've got different expectations right from the start, that will take on board what you say and will consider that as part of decision making, better to have that conversation early if their expectations are that they might make the decision or be part of that key decision team. And that applies every bit as much when we're working across government as when we're talking to the community. Thanks, Jay. One of the ways that you can work and let the community know about your project is yoursay.sa.gov.au. 120 South Australians are signed up and 42,000 of them receive a monthly newsletter letting them know about what engagements are out there. The main reason I wanted to talk about that today is that Your Say had a platform upgrade back in April that was fairly significant. Where in the past Your Say had to be published externally to everybody, now Your Say, you are able to use its new tools and functionality for closed groups or offline groups. So I thought that might be particularly interesting for you guys, whether it's collaborating across other government agencies or maybe with consumer groups or other representative panels, that you can now use all the tools in Your Say, surveys, mapping tools, document uploads, forums, question and answers. You are able to use them in an offline sense so that you're just targeting the people that you want. And Jay will skip 2 slides. I've gone through that. I've gone through that. And what have we got? Oh, we've got some new transitions happening here. Okay, let me get into the case studies, the bit where we really learn what's going on. The digital inclusion strategy is a piece that I'm working on with others in my department at the moment. The state doesn't have a digital inclusion strategy, so this will be the first one. And so we came to this wanting it to be very much a collaborative, cross-government, collaborative co-design piece. So going out to our counterparts across government and saying, what are you already doing in the digital inclusion space? What does that look like? And where are you going in the future? We identified that there's already quite an amount of good stuff happening, but the end users, the people that would benefit from digital inclusion strategy, the strategy and ongoing work are not necessarily knowing what services are already out there. Thanks, Jane. So we're looking at South Australians, whether they're limited by access, affordable or affordability, or their digital ability. Are they able to access online government services, but also participate online? Thanks, Jay. We can move on. So at the moment, this is some very early creative designs by my comms team. Let me just say it's going to be a little bit simplified by the time we finish, but this one's a work in progress. So I thought I'd show you this. 3 months of collaboration across government with all other government agencies, with peak bodies, with service providers, and especially people with lived experience, has brought us to a point where we have 10 principles and priorities that are informing the next round of work that we are doing. That was brought together by us engaging ThinkPlace, who are a consultancy firm working internationally, and they've been really involved in the national work around digital inclusion on the federal level. So they helped us leapfrog into this space by catching us up on some of the work that had already been happening nationally. And then we calibrated that for a South Australian audience to make sure that these principles and these priorities resonated locally. So we're at the point now where we're going out to agencies again and taking a deeper dive into what they have already identified as digital inclusion, because, and I'll come to this, when I look at some of the lessons that we've learned across the way, front-ending your engagement with the opportunity to educate people on your project is a real success factor. Actually, if we go to the next slide, Jay, I think it is those learnings. Yeah. So, a midpoint reflection. Assumptions at the start of a project can really trip you up. Take the time to understand your audience and to do the education pieces and ask the questions early if you needed to. And I think for us, one of the learnings that we had is we used very traditional channels through our group, which is the Office of the Information Officer, our Chief Information Officer, and going out to people. But in doing so, we probably weren't reaching broadly and across the organisation enough. So we needed to understand our stakeholders better to make sure that we targeted invitations to workshops and involvement appropriately. However, there have been some great things that we've learned and have been successful so far that hopefully will be helpful for you in the work that you're doing. Partnering and co-designing with the sector. So understanding those stakeholder groups that I've already talked about, bring them into the room. It is amazing in these spaces where we're talking about human-centered design, the South Australians that are impacted by the work, even though there's frustration out there sometimes because of our programs, just how generous the community will really be in engaging and giving us time to go through some of these processes. So definitely engage those people as early as you can. People with lived experience are absolutely critical to the success of what we're doing with the digital inclusion strategy. Because there is a great majority of South Australians who are already engaged online, we're starting to look at those people who can't or won't. So understanding the experiences of key people that have lived experience and what was their motivation or what were their barriers, and getting under the skin of that is absolutely critical for us to be able to make a significant movement in the dial around those people who feel safe or who feel supported or who have access to data or devices to be able to engage online where it's appropriate. I talked about the consultancy think place that we brought on early, absolutely critical to the success in this one. We didn't have enough high-level expertise in this space, so we brought it in essentially, and they have created a huge amount of richness to this process and just helped us leapfrog, which has been amazing. For me, strong executive support has been absolutely critical to what we've been doing. Thanks, Jane. Look, I love talking about this case study, and this is the Child and Family Support System reform. And if I could give you a tip, if you get the opportunity to hear Dr. Alyssa Willis from DEH's Early Intervention Research Directorate, if you get the opportunity to hear about the 3-year program that they're almost concluding around reforming those intensive first 1,000 days, do get on board with it. It's amazing work. And for us in the engagement space where we're talking about really making a difference to people's lives, the way Anne-Marie Hayes, Alyssa Willis, Dana Shen, the consultant, and so many others that have worked with on this, they have come at this with an absolute fearless approach to co-design and making sure people with lived experience have been in the room. Having spent the last 3 years in child protection, I am so passionate about their project succeeding, because that's what's going to turn the trajectory that the states are on with children in the system at the moment. So let's have a little look, Jay, if we can go to the next slide, at what they set out to do and what they are achieving. So this has been going for near the end of 3 years, and they're about to do the next round. What they've realised that a bit the same with my digital inclusion strategy, we are being asked to design something for all people, and that it really can send you down a lot of rabbit holes. So being focused on what areas you can or you need to have the most influence or outcomes from your priority or your strategy or your project is really important. So for them, it was young parents or potential young parents, adolescents that are already at risk, Aboriginal families, and that first 1,000 days. That's pretty broad. That's probably going to cover a lot. So, you know, they certainly won't check picking the easy bits. Thanks, Jay. So in designing that, they made sure that the Aboriginal cohort, which was identified as a very large group, were appropriately represented and engaged early. One of their strategies around that was making sure that the facilitator and one of the chief designers of the engagement, Dana Shen, who is also an Aboriginal woman herself, was a part of that, to build credibility, to build cultural safety right into the start of the engagement. They embedded a trauma response. They wanted to provide some early interventions to start building success and momentum around the engagement. So it wasn't waiting for 3 years for things to start to have a positive effect for people. They needed to focus on regional areas and robust monitoring and evaluation, and being transparent about their responses was absolutely critical to this group. Next page. Okay, I sat down with Alyssa the other days and I said, tell me, what was it like starting this project? You know, what were the strengths of it? They started out with a very skeptical stakeholder group. These people had been talked to time and time and time again. So they knew that they were not starting with a level playing field. Those early stages of building relationship, building credibility, and and making sure that anything that was on the table, they were very transparent about what could or couldn't result from that, was just so critical to this being a successful project. The strengths at commencement were having a really strong team and a credible team. Setting up the team. I asked Alyssa about that because we've all probably been in places where we've inherited people that come with great skills and some that may not be the right people for the team. It was a 50-50 mix from what I understand for them. They needed to broaden out the skills of the team, but they also had some long-term people that had great knowledge of the system, but also may have needed to come on the journey about what a co-design could achieve and have some fresh and more contemporary thinking, not be so held back by the past. If we go to the next slide, this is how they're describing it at the moment. So essentially, where in the past, somebody who was in need of support could have come into the system in a variety, I think it was over 20 different ways. You could be introduced into the care system, which was a strength, was also a weakness because people fell through the cracks on that and there was a lot of repetition. So one of the early ways that they started to get some traction, to get some credibility, was to create that CFCSS pathway service, which was the one-stop shop and that main triaging and information opportunity that then linked people, started to help them get data to help for improvements, but also to really to understand the people that were using the service. Thanks, Jay. So what were they saying were the success factors? Their authorising environment, high engagement from the executive team who were very supportive. The leaders of the team had strong credibility in the sector. The co-designed workshops were facilitated by a skilled, credible, independent facilitator, which was really important with this group. The co-design and the people in the room, the people with lived experience, were the ones that came up with the principles and the way forward. They were very outcomes driven. They couldn't have it be seen to be another talk fest based on the history of engagement in the past. So they knew that they had to step up to the plate and deliver quickly. And that helped them to build trust and credibility. And the main reason Alyssa said around that was being incredibly transparent about the data and the reporting, making sure that it wasn't nuanced, it wasn't selective, that if they asked people for information and they were sharing that with the people involved in the care co-design space, that they were very much out there. Thank you, Jay. Next one. I'm going to talk just one slide because we're nearly up to Q&A around the South Australian cybersecurity framework. And if we can go to that next slide, Jay. So when we're talking about cross-government stakeholder collaboration, nothing can probably be as sticky as cybersecurity and different agencies and different IT systems and different levels of complexity and new and emerging technologies, AI and facial recognition and all these things. But the team through last year, through in a pandemic as well, pulled together the cybersecurity framework across South Australia. And they talked about their success factors about creating buy-in and support by early engagement with the agencies. The team that I'm in, the Office for the Chief Information Officer, sometimes we have to do things to agencies because they are a cyber or a system-wide thing. That's not always a great way to build relationship with people. But with something like this in the framework, they built in the time to build the relationships and to make sure that they went through the appropriate committees, boards and engagement at the start to create that authorising environment and to also set expectations really clearly from the start and understand other agencies' perspectives and the barriers that they might be facing. Agency representation from the other government departments was absolutely critical because in some agencies, whilst they might be a small agency, the breadth of what they have to deliver might mean that they might need more than one person at the table, or it's a major or very large organisation. So don't be too prescriptive from the start about what the representation is. Use that stakeholder analysis piece right at the start to understand who you need to collaborate with. And I mentioned that when I was talking about the digital inclusion strategy, because we went through the information officers first. That first round of information, while it was good, we're now going back out again to get a deeper level of understanding of what's happening in the inclusion space across agencies. So it wasn't wrong, but it's mean that we're having to step through it in stages that potentially we could have grabbed early on. The other really key thing that Troy and Emily brought out about the cybersecurity framework was really looking at your team and understanding that you need the richness of different disciplines in your team. It can't be tech heavy or policy heavy or just engagement heavy. You actually need those people that will challenge you internally and make sure that each element of your engagement is working in a rich way. That helps you because working across government agencies, they're all different as well. So for those of us that have been around, seen other agencies work, or have come from outside and seen other engagement strategies work, it's fantastic when you see them come together and start to build really positive cross collaboration in government. So I reckon I'll wrap up there. I hope that's timing's okay. And let's see whether there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Brett. Really, really interesting. We're going to stop recording and take some questions.